what started off at Babel, they had a one world system, religion, language, probably economy. They had a one world dictator, Nimrod, and they were, in defiance to God, they were going to build that tower to be able to go up there and, who knows, but God looked at it, and we know how that ended. He came down threw the smackdown. He threw the gauntlet down and said, "It's not time. If I were to let this continue, then there's nothing that they wouldn't be able to do." There's elements that are controlling the scenes today that are trying to fulfill all these esoteric prophecies. The same thing that Nimrod started to do. Well, they were worshiping the fallen angels back then, right? They had the gods of old. These are the same ones that continue to be worshipped today by various different sects and leaders of government and the members of the deep state. That's why they do the rituals and what have you. But it started off back then, and these people are that it's been passed down from generation to generation. This ideology, this belief system that this Messiah, this person in place of Christ is going to come. And right now we're seeing that they're setting up his world kingdom to be taken over by him.
The nation of America has a hidden history that most people aren't really aware of. There's a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of ideas, but in reality, America, we have evidence that America, before it was called America, that it was known as this great Western Hemisphere. Okay, the Western Hemisphere, that is what was prophesied by Plato. You had, even the Greek biographer Plutarch talked about voyages to this great land in the ancient world. So really, you got to get past this whole American mindset of Christopher Columbus and the Native American Indians. Governor DeWitt Clinton, former governor of New York, he was also held a prestigious role at the New York Historical Society. And he said on record that they had come into contact with ancient fortifications on our soil, and these fortifications were evidence that there was an advanced civilization far exceeding that of the Native American Indians right here in America. Now, this was on record with DeWitt Clinton. We found all types of information showing that there was an ancient civilization here before the Native Americans, that there was this idea of serpent worship on this continent, and Plato himself, which Plato is a worldwide household name. Everyone knows who Plato is. Major occultist, democratic mindset. They believed that in the end times, there would be a great nation that was going to rise up in the Western Hemisphere. Again, the Western Hemisphere is the key. The great nation of the Western Hemisphere is going to rise up. It's going to take its rightful place as the beacon of light that was going to rule the world. It was going to bring about a philosophic empire, a one world philosophic empire, and it was going to be utilizing the creeds and the beliefs of the old pagan world. What does that mean in modern terms? It's going to be a resurrection of the old religions, the Babylonian mystery schools, the secret societies, the gods of old, possibly a reference even to the 72 fallen angels. Okay, now let me take you back to some of these ancient views of America. The idea was we were going to be that nation that was going to bring about this democratic commonwealth to the world. Democracy, that was the goal of the ancient philosophers. Democracy was actually an occult view. Now, this might shock some people watching this video, but democracy is an occult view. It's all about bringing together a certain type of system. Now, you start studying the end times, you find out it's a beast system that's a control grid set up for everyone to be living under one basic ruler. Now, think about this. The Native Americans, we have evidence now that Native Americans that were here, not all of them, but by large, they had secret societies that were literally ancient forms of Freemasonry within their Native American tribes. Satanic rituals, blood rituals. We even have evidence of underground kivas, temples, which I'm sure you're familiar with when you get into the whole Four Corners conspiracy. All these things taking place on American soil. But interestingly, we find out that the God who they revered and worshiped, again, not all of them, but by majority, we're dealing with a serpent god, a plumed, feathered serpent god. The same god shows up in Mexico under the name Quetzalcoatl. You go down into Quiché. In Quiché, they called him Gucumatz, and then in Peru, they called him Amaru. Amaru is the root of the word America. Amaruca literally translates over the land of the plumed serpent. Sir Francis Bacon, who I believe Francis Bacon was William Shakespeare, he penned the book The New Atlantis. He believed that this land called North America, he believed that this was the site of the original Atlantis. He also believed that this land was going to be fulfilling major prophecies according to what he studied in the occult world, going all the way back to ancient Greece. So, interestingly, when you study the writings of the New Atlantis, you're going to find out that America has been fulfilling these prophecies. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So much so that the occultists, such as Manly P. Hall, who was a major theosophist, by the way, he taught that America was going to be that beacon of light in the last days. He said that this nation was literally going to be shining like a light on a hill, that we were going to shine across the world, and we were going to bring about the democratic commonwealth. We were going to bring about the old religions of the world, the superior ancient knowledge, and that we were going to be that nation that was spoken of by all the old mystics and the prophets of old. Now, part of that is also reviving the Egyptian mystery schools. All of these things have been fulfilled, but here's the thing. The secret societies, they have been maintaining the language, the rituals, the esoteric knowledge. They've been maintaining all of this secretly for thousands of years, passing it on. Furthermore, we have come to the conclusion that the freedom of religion was a cloak that would allow all the secret societies to come and operate freely here, and even to set up policy. A lot of the policy that we've seen over the years was set with the mindset of protecting the secret societies, allowing them to get where they need to be so that they can operate and they can call down the gods of old.
So the deep state has three different levels. At first, you have the legislative branch and bureaucracy of spreading this ideology out on the world stage. Underneath that, you have the second level, which influences the first level. And so in that level, you have foreign governments, you have occult secret societies, your Skull and Bones, and et cetera. Then you also have your think tanks and all of those and rich globalists that want to see their agenda make it to affect that first level. So that's the second level, and they're all influencing the first level. Underneath that is the spirit realm. So these people that are in the secret societies and occultists and want to see it put out on the first level, the world stage, they're going and they're doing these rituals, and we choose Bohemian Grove for that purpose because we don't have enough time to break down every secret society and their purposes and whatever. Ultimately, their goal is all the same. But at Bohemian Grove, it's like where the walls come down. That's where the ritual aspect of things come, and the third level of the deep state. So the third level is tapping into the spirit realm to be able to get your power and to be able to get your direction. And that influences the second level, and that influences the first level. And that's how it goes across the world scene to be an act.
People say, well, what about George Washington? Because he's touted as such a man of integrity. Matter of fact, there's records that he attended church regularly, a Christian church. There's also records that he and his pastor, there's letters that have been written. What we find out is that the pastor, one of Washington's pastors, he said that overall he spoke with Washington time and time again, that Washington was a deist. Okay, Washington didn't want to have a problem with the guy. He wanted to continue going to the church because it was a political move. But in reality, Washington said he was a deist. They went back and forth on this matter. This has been documented historically. He was not a Christian. He was definitely a deist. Matter of fact, their idea was to come and set up a government here that was almost identical to the oligarchy that they left. See, most people don't realize that. They don't realize that Washington was part of a grand conspiracy to create basically a new oligarchy here, a government controlled by a few. And that's all historical. We document that in our film. But the idea was to set that up, but to give more freedoms. But it still allowed the elite to run everything that the government wants. Any move of the government, the elite were going to be involved. They were not going to allow the common man to make decisions. Washington was definitely a Freemason. Matter of fact, they cast sprigs of acacia at his Masonic funeral to signify him going on to the land of Osiris in the underworld. Now, they believed Osiris was already in the underworld, and they believed that Washington was the America's first Osiris, but he wasn't meant to be the final. He was meant to be a type. And we see that in how they went down and went through with his funeral. As a matter of fact, if you go back and study the death and the funerals of Washington, you're going to find out that there were two. You had two different eulogies. You want to look for the Masonic eulogy that was presented by Timothy Bigelow Jr. What's crazy about this is that he was literally being set up in a system that was a religious system that was set up to bring about the spirit of Osiris, a resurrected spirit, a reincarnated spirit, if you will, of Osiris, to possess the ruler of this nation. The Crypt of Washington is sitting it's a basement level of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. This is literally a page out of ancient Egyptian magic. You walk into the Capitol building, you look up, and what do you see in the dome? You see this thing called the apotheosis of George Washington. Now, if you really was a Christian, like so many people say, all you got to do is look up and see the heaven that George Washington is ascending into, which is painted on this massive mural, and he's surrounded by all the pagan gods. You say, well, why on earth, if Washington was a Christian, why would he be getting deified in the first place into a god? That's what the word apotheosis means. Literally, Washington becoming a god. Walt Whitman, the famous American poet, said that George Washington was becoming the Osiris. Now, pagan gods, what does this have to do with DC? Well, Thomas Jefferson literally designed the city to honor the old pantheon of pagan gods. This is on record at the Library of Congress. People can investigate what's called the Most Approved Plan. They literally built this city to pull a line from the Ghostbusters, how they talk about drawing down the power on these certain buildings, cursed buildings, buildings that are set up for drawing down occult power. The city of DC literally was built as a massive ritualistic chessboard to do public rituals en masse. So the Washington Monument, people like to go and look at it. Everybody wants to see it, but they don't understand the history of it. But just the measurements alone should be enough to raise some question. It's 555 feet tall above ground, and the physics involved, in order to keep it from falling over, you have 111 feet inside the earth. So you're ending up with a totality of 666 feet total from tip to base inside the earth. But what's crazy about this is that in the base of it, they have inculcated the magic Apollonian square. Now, they believe that this square has a binding factor to it, that it can bind certain things. Some people call it a 666 square. And the 666 square, basically what you end up with is that no matter how you add up the numbers in any of the lines, you end up with 111, with a total number of 666. So what's crazy is that they believe it's a binding utility, but it also goes back to some prophecies about the resurrection of Apollo. Now, the same entity that we would call Apollo, others call Osiris. So there's a connection there. Apollo and Osiris are the same entity. It's just from two different parts of the world. People can go back and look into the Sibylline prophecies. They can understand that this is a very real connection. The Masonic Lodge has that same 666 square in the skylight of their ritual chamber, which we show in the film, surrounded by the 33rd degree Freemasonic emblems of Isis. And what's crazy is that directly beneath that 666 square, you have their altar with the holy books, including the Bible. They believe that by putting the Bible underneath this square, that it's binding the power and influence of the Word of God. But it doesn't stop there. There's a secret Bible bound in the testes of the Washington Monument. This Bible was what Dan Brown called the lost symbol. See, people have no idea how these books and this pop culture, such as Dan Brown and others, how they're conditioning us to what's really going on. They're pre-programming us to accept these things. The Dan Brown lost symbol was a Bible, a Masonic Bible, that's bound in the testes of the Washington Monument beneath a 12-foot mini obelisk. Most people don't even know about the 12-foot mini obelisk. We were able to get photos from when they did some renovation work over there. Matter of fact, Atlas Obscura got their hands on the photos, and that's where we first heard about the 12-foot obelisk. No one else knew about it. If you look down at the base of the main obelisk, you have what looks like a sewage hole, a manhole with a metal cover. You pull that thing up, which you can't, but they did, and we got footage of all of this. They pulled it up, and sure enough, you've got a 12-foot mini obelisk. 12 is a mockery of the number of disciples of Jesus Christ. It's also in the occult world, that's the number of the perfect government that they believe that's going to be set up in the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Now, what is the Novus Ordo Seclorum? That is Latin for the new order of the ages. Anybody that carries around a dollar bill in their pocket, pull it out, you'll see the pyramid, you'll see the Novus Ordo Seclorum. That was what this was all about. The founders of this nation knew that this was the land prophesied by the old mystics. They wanted to resurrect their old gods right here on this land, and they knew for a fact that this would be the continent that was going to lead the world in this Novus Ordo Seclorum. I definitely believe that rituals are utilized to obtain technology. We do a whole breakdown in our film Hollow Earth Chronicles about how the Nazis had this secret group of women known as the Vril Maidens, and they would embark on seances, and in those seances, they would begin to automatic write, and they would get information in other languages. Matter of fact, the blueprints given to the Nazis did not for the bell. The Nazis had this craft called the bell, or the Die Glocke. That information did not just get given to one person. It actually got given in two separate events in two separate languages. It was years later that they decoded those languages and realized it was all one document, and it was the blueprints for what they believed to be some type of a time machine UFO. Some believe it was a time machine, some believe it was just a flying craft. But yeah, I believe that technology is oftentimes given through satanic rituals and seances. But what I see more is the power and the atmospheric shifts that are taking place through these rituals that are changing the course of the direction of America. There's a very strange ritual that dates back to ancient Egypt, known as the Osiris rising, or the rising of Osiris ritual. You'll see it listed in different names on the internet, probably. Osiris, he had a conspirator named Set, and Set wanted to do away with Osiris. So he had him cut up into 14 pieces. Now his body's cut up into 14 pieces. It gets thrown into the Nile River. And Isis, of course, isn't happy about this. Isis tries to collect all the pieces up, and she's only able to find 13 pieces. So she fashions together those 13 pieces to form a more perfect union, which is the framework of our 13 colonies, a more perfect union, based off of the myth of Osiris. Now that's showing Egyptian magic even in the framework and the fabric of our foundation, right? It's not an accident that they brought together 13 colonies to form a more perfect union. That was all by design. It was all manufactured. But what's crazy is that she fashions together these 13 pieces, but guess what piece is missing? His genitals. So what do? They set up this ritual. That's what the obelisk is, by the way. The obelisk represents the 14th piece that they couldn't find. It is literally a phallic symbol. You find it in the Vatican. You find it in ancient Egypt. You find it here in the States. You find it all over cemeteries. You find it all over the Masonic lodges. It represents the phallic, the male sex organ of Osiris. And they believe by setting up this ritual, now it's all a recreation of the original ritual that took place between Isis and the 13 pieces of Osiris, right between the Washington Monument and the Dome of Isis, which is the Capitol building. Now, this is fascinating because the original ritual had to take place between what we would, in a courtyard, between a dome and an obelisk. Putting those two together like that creates a power generator, literally a generator for this ritual. And the idea is that the seed of Osiris, the seed, is going to come up and emit out of the phallic symbol, which is the Washington Monument, and it's going to take over whoever our president is. Now, this sounds crazy, but think about this. In ancient Egypt, what had happened was the pharaoh would go through this ritual. He would enter in a man, and he would exit the ritual a god. That was their belief. And they believed that their pharaoh was literally the embodiment of Osiris because of that ritual. They were calling him up out of the underworld. So what we have in America is this same ritual, basically, that the Freemasons believe that they have maintained the proper language and the ritual to a T from the ancient world. They claim to have this still today at the inauguration of every U.S. president. The president is up there, right there between the dome and the obelisk, right there in that power generator, and right around the corner at the Herodome, which is what they call the Masonic Mecca of the world, literally. The Herodome is this temple, this massive, crazy temple in D.C. They are up there beneath that magic square we were talking about, that magic 666 square, binding the influence and the power of the Word of God. They believe they're binding the power of the Bible while they do this ritual. And they are literally doing the raising of Osiris ritual while the presidential inauguration happens at every election. And they are literally calling on the spirit of Osiris to raise up, or Apollo, however you want to slice it, to come out of the underworld and to possess the president. So the president, the president-elect walks into this ritual a man, exits the ritual a god. This is what the Freemasons believe. Now, people are going to say, well, not every president's a Freemason. Well, most of them have ties to secret societies, but they're not all conscious of the ritual. Doesn't matter. This ritual takes place every inauguration. The Freemasons hold to this. Here's one thing I want to point out about this. The ritual that takes place there, it's been going on now since the beginning, to our knowledge, since the beginning of this nation being set up. They believe that it's going to stick eventually. See, they don't know which president is going to be the final Osiris. Now, they believed in the foundation of this nation that Washington was a type. He was the first Osiris. Technically, every president in their eyes is an Osiris. But the crazy thing is that not every time the ritual is going to stick. They have to keep doing it until it actually sticks and they get that one that they've been waiting for. This is kind of like when we talk about Babylon working. How many years, was Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard working in the desert trying to get this ritual to stick? They do this at the inauguration of every U.S. president because they believe there is going to come a time in a president that will be the one. He will be the one, and they will go through this ritual when his body lies in state in the Capitol Dome. I believe they're going to do this ritual, and that final raising ritual, that's going to be the one that's going to stick. I don't believe it's going to stick when they're doing it at an inauguration. The real one's going to take place when this Antichrist man dies. They lay him in state in the Capitol building beneath the 72 pentagrams and the apotheosis of George Washington. And that's not it. There's so much more numerology about the Capitol building and the 13 statues and the statutory hall. But I believe that's the real ritual. That's the one where he's going to raise, where the spirit of Osiris, which the Bible talks about this Apollyon coming up from the bottomless pit.